Well, there's an Associated Press article by Jenna Fryer that is titled, "For Many, the Sexist Games Have Begun," and it's claims about sexism and comments that are supposedly sexist about the women athletes at the Olympics. For example, when a gay beach volleyball player, Larissa Franca, embraced her spouse after a match, NBC sportscaster Chris Marlowe referred to her as her husband, not wife. Well, I don't know if he saw the lady or if he just presumed that the spouse was a husband. It might have been that he didn't know, but at no point can I find a way of interpreting this as sexist. Maybe he meant it as a homophobic dig, but not a sexist dig. Sorry, I don't buy it. Yeah, the whole article is allegedly one sexist event after another. The next bullet point in the article is that a Alaska shooter, a woman on the trap shooting team, won a bronze medal, and the Chicago Tribune did a tweet that pointed out, that congratulated her and mentioned that she was married to the Chicago Bears defensive end player, Mitch Unrein. So everybody's tweeting, oh, you should recognize the woman for what she's done and not because who she's married to. I'm sorry, guys, but this is just a local newspaper getting the local angle on it. After all, they're tweeting about the bronze medalist in trap shooting. It's like when people talk about any story in the local newspaper, they're going to get the local spin on it. I think at the last census, there were a total of 3 Cincinnati Bengals fans in the entire state of Texas. One of those was the Bengals quarterback who lives here. The other was his wife, and the third one didn't understand the question. But every time the sports pages refers to Andy Dalton of the Cincinnati Bengals, it always mentions that he's married to a local woman who lives around here. It's not because he's not important except for who he's married to. It's just saying, here's a local connection with this otherwise uninteresting story. I mean, people around here don't really give a rat's ass about Cincinnati, okay? But he played college ball here. He married a woman that lives here, so the local angle is always important. And yet, when they do this with a woman athlete, they act like, oh, you act like she's only important because she's married to this guy that plays football. No, they're just pointing out that this lady has a local connection. They do it all the time. It's not sexist. It's just normal reporting. The next complaint involved a Hungarian Olympian, a swimmer. The NBC play-by-play announcer noted that the swimmer's husband is her coach, and that he said, there's the guy responsible for turning the swimmer, his wife, into a whole different swimmer. Okay, this is allegedly a sexist remark. It's like the lady writing this article doesn't understand this goes on all the time. When a pitching coach in baseball makes changes to how a pitcher operates and it improves their pitching, they make notation of it. When a quarterback coach gets someone to play their game differently, when any coach, coaches exist for a reason, when any coach has an athlete change something and it improves them, they give credit to the coach for doing it. But this stupid idiot writing this article acts as though giving credit to the coach, who is a man, and her husband is somehow a sexist thing. No, it isn't. The next gripe was that an Italian newspaper editor was fired over the headline, "The Chubby Trio Just Misses Out on the Olympic Miracle," after the country's women's archery team finished fourth. Okay, I guess it's the second law of thermodynamics that says anything that a man says is sexist. And Italian men, in particular, the third law of thermodynamics, Italian men are particularly sexist. So if an Italian man says something about the chubby, heavy women's team, archery team. It's got to be viewed as a sexist comment because we know for a fact that he would never say that about fat men on an athletic team. Could I suggest that maybe what's really going on here is if he had said it about male team members who are kind of chunky for an archery team, not shot put, not weightlifting, but archery, and if he had said something like that about a man's team being hefty, nobody would have noticed. He wouldn't have gotten fired, and the only reason it's considered a problem is because you don't say anything about a woman's weight. And supposedly he's being the sexist when nobody would have given a shit if he'd said the same thing about men. And the article goes on and says, each comment is pounced upon as a dig against women, that they aren't as athletic or important as men. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to imply that the women weren't as athletic. Let me not imply that at all. The women aren't as athletic as the men. That's why they have different divisions for the women to compete just against other women, and the men compete just against other men. This is the sexism at the Olympics. It is the sexism that says we are not going to hold women to the same standards as men. If we did, there might not be any women at the Olympics. So we give them their own categories so they can compete only against each other. Even in sports like marksmanship, the NCAA has men and women compete against each other. And the reason I know this is not because I or anyone else follows shooting at colleges unless they're killing each other in class, but the local team here, TCU, in 2010 won the national championship, and even then I wouldn't have heard about it. Like I didn't hear about it the next year. The reason I heard about it that year was it was an all-women's team that won for the first time ever, and so far the only time ever, against male teams or mixed gender teams. They get to go on, I think it was the Tonight Show. They get publicity all over the place. They make headlines because, hey, the women beat the men. That's the only reason I even know that they have a shooting competition in the NCAA. But even in the Olympics, they don't do that. They only make women picking up a rifle and shooting. They don't make them do that against men. I'm not demeaning the amount of skill involved, but it's not athleticism. Even in something that doesn't require the athleticism of most of these sports, they still don't make women compete on the same level as men. So, yeah, some of us who aren't brain dead would suggest that the women aren't as athletic as the men, which is why they have their own divisions. And as they've complained about also in this article, and people have done it earlier in this newspaper, that the women's soccer team was fighting tooth and toenail. Why aren't we paid the same amount as the men's soccer team? Because you're not competing against them. You're not as good as they are. If you only have to compete against women, maybe you're not as good as they are. Sorry, fact of life. Okay, I hate having to spell out the bleeding obvious, but basically when addressing articles like this and attitudes like this, it's apparent that that's exactly what I'm going to have to do. So yes, I know there are plenty of women out there who are more athletic than lots of men. You don't have to tell me. I have a sister who lettered in basketball when she was in junior high. When I got into junior high, I didn't go out for basketball, but I had to take PE. So when I was dribbling or attempting to dribble a basketball, the coach jumped all over me because he really thought I was just goofing off. He could not believe that anybody was really that uncoordinated. He really did. He thought I was goofing off, and I really am that uncoordinated. So yes, I know lots of women are more athletic than men. We know that is obvious, just as obvious as it is that when the best athletes are competing against each other, the men are going to outrank the women almost all the time. Just a fact of life. And why the hell do we have to explain the obvious? But we do. One more little point while we're on the subject. Several years ago, in the early 2000s, there was a woman golfer, Annika Sorenstam, who became the best woman golfer in my lifetime. She became the first woman golfer since 1945 who was good enough that she was allowed to play on the PGA tournament against male players. And it was locally at the Colonial Country Club. Otherwise, again, I don't watch golf. I wouldn't have noticed. But for the first time in 58 years, a woman is good enough. She is totally dominating the ladies' PGA. She has more wins than any other woman in history. So she's going to play against the male golfers. She goes out on the preliminary rounds and she doesn't make the cut. By far the best woman golfer in 50 plus years, and there were 95 male golfers at that tournament. And it's not like the Masters or Pebble Beach, okay, it's the Colonial. Tiger Woods wasn't there. Lots of male golfers weren't there who were top-notch golfers. But the best woman golfer in the world had nearly 100 men golfers who were better than her. This is a fact of life. Get over it. Accept our differences. Men and women are different.